record. All right, everybody. Hello and welcome. Happy Tuesday, October 22nd. I hope you're well wherever you may be. My name is Albert. You are here for mock interview number 113 with art director, or rather for designer role with Michael. And I am your host, founder of Albert's List. I know that was several things at once there, but here we go. We've been doing these mock interviews since almost the beginning of time, 4 years ago during the pandemic, and we are happy to bring it back as we can and on a regular basis. And if you're here watching, we are welcome. Thank you for joining us and spending your Tuesday night with us. With us as usual is Cory of careershakers.com. He's here to ask questions of Michael, who is a designer and looking for his next role. Michael will answer questions and Cory will give feedback. And as a member of the audience, you can also give questions as well or ask questions about the general interview process. So without further ado, Cory, I'm handing it over to you.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And by the way, quick plug, Albert and I are running our third version of the interview bootcamp. So if you're watching this or you have upcoming interviews and you feel like practicing some more and honing your interview skills, you can sign up for that. We are starting the bootcamp this Thursday. It's going to start out the Eventbrite link. We'll put that in the Zoom chat as well. And we always want to give a huge round of applause to our volunteers, and today it's Mike. So please give him a round of applause and more background to everyone in the audience and for those who will be watching this recording later on. So Michael, why don't you walk them through high level, your background, what kind of jobs you're looking for, what companies, what industries are of interest for you. And then that way, if anyone watching this later likes your background or has potential leads or referrals, they can reach out to you.
Sure. Yeah. I'm Michael Davis. I've been in creative for about 20 years or so, working in San Francisco years ago, and moving to Asia for about 13 years. I was in San Francisco for 10. I was in Hong Kong, Shanghai, and Saigon for a total of around 13 years, working with in between agencies and my own independent consultancy in hospitality and architecture. I also worked with Gensler in San Francisco, and I currently am working as a consultant on brand identity projects. That's been the bulk of my work. I've also worked in PR well for Edelman, and I had some pharmaceutical background with Janssen Pharmaceuticals and just a variety of different projects and clients. So I'm looking, I'm looking, actually, I've got a couple of interviews on Friday, so this is really well timed. And one is in hospitality with a big hotel chain, because I did work for a luxury hotel chain called Shangri-La Hotels in Asia for a number of years with Ogilvy. And then with a startup as well on Friday. So I'm interested in both, and both are kind of brand identity related project or positions. I can't hear you.
You are on mute.
Sorry about that. So yes, if anyone's interested in Michael's background, I threw his website into the group chat. How do I pronounce that? Is it verticaldes.com?
Yeah, verticaldes.com. Yeah.
Verticaldes.com. So you can check that out. And today we are going to be practicing a senior graphic designer role. And this one, I don't have a link. Mike copied it and pasted it into the email, but it seems like a pretty standard senior graphic designer role at one of the agencies that's going to be placing this for a client. So that is what we're going to be practicing today. And as usual, I'll wear the hat of the interviewer. So I'll ask an interview question. I usually don't provide any hints unless you get totally stuck, because we want this to feel as authentic as possible. And then at the end of each question, I'll give some feedback, some areas of improvement, as well as some areas that Michael did very well. That way, for those of you who are following along at home or you have upcoming interviews, you can take some of the same lessons and then use that for practicing later on your own. And I have got about 6 questions that I wanted to go through. But if you have questions in the audience, please use the Zoom chat. So if you have questions for me or for Michael, then we'll get all those answered for you. Ready to begin? Excellent. So, can you tell me about your graphic design experience?
In general, I mean, a lot of it is in the brand identity space. I've built brand identities from fintechs like Sonic Shares, which is an ETF fund, to architecture firms, to shopping malls. And I've worked directly with clients. I've worked through agencies. I've done production work. I've just a full range I've done social, I've done campaigns, I've done websites. So just a variety of different projects.
Okay. And then, which of these graphic design projects kind of stands out to you the most?
I mean, I guess I like variety. So one that stands out is when I designed the Intel corporate headquarters in Silicon Valley, their lobby, where I was working with Gensler, and Intel wanted to incorporate their branding into the interior design of the space. So working with Gensler, I came up with this concept of these digital displays, starting out with the user journey, and really exploring how they would interact with the space. And then working with a team, we concept came up with some concepts for these and I ultimately came up with the concept for the digital displays, which feature work created using the Intel chip and are kind of literally immersive. They change to fish tank, like you're underwater in a fish tank and such, but they're basically creating an immersive environment for the participant to engage with in the lobby space.
All right, awesome, very cool. So this is like a standard, more specific version of the "Tell me about yourself" question. I started with this because, well, you folks have probably taken a look at Mike's website, but Mike's actually got a variety of experiences. He's done some graphic design work. He's also done some art director work. He's had a variety of different job titles. And so because he's applying for a graphic design role, I wanted him to kind of point out and highlight to me the graphic design experiences and projects and things that would be most relevant if I was hiring him for my client. And so, one thing I would mention is that you should probably proactively share like some of the more recent projects that you've done, or at least some of the more notable ones, right?
Sure.
Just to kind of highlight that, yes, your job title on your resume says art director, but you actually have some design experiences that are recent. And then you can talk a little bit about like how you came up with them and the overall impact, customer feedback, etc. I think it's great that you highlighted you have the overall experience, right, from the whole customer journey, because it does show that you have that strong client management aspect, which is going to be important. So also just making sure you hit on the graphic design part as well.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in response, I guess and thank you for the feedback. I do appreciate it. I guess typically they would ask about, they wouldn't say specifically graphic design per se. I think they would, because it's such a broad term for me to cover. So I'm not sure if that would be a typical, it's not a question I've been asked in previous interviews.
Yeah,
Um,
mine wasn't more specific just because of how your resume was written. They might just be looking through your resume or tell me about yourself or something like that.
that's what they typically
Yeah,
do.
but I think I plan to do it this way for the practice, just because I wanted to highlight and show the audience that if you do have a resume where you've done a variety of different roles, but you're applying for something a little bit specific, then you should be prepared to kind of talk about only the stuff that's relevant, that would be pertinent for them to know. But in your upcoming interviews, it's most likely going to be a lot more broad, but you should have your answer to be more specific.
Okay.
Because if you pitch yourself as like, yeah, I've been an art director and I've been going around, then they'll be like, okay, but he applied for the graphic design role. So is this really what he wants? Which leads me to the second question. Why do you want to be a graphic designer now?
Well, I mean, I enjoy typically building identities and solving problems that the client may have in presenting the work. To me, a design work is more than just a pretty picture. It's a concept. It might get into messaging. But I really view it as the suit of the company, and it's not just a surface treatment in the sense that you wouldn't go to a meeting in a cheap suit. Your company shouldn't go to a meeting looking like a cheap suit either. So I enjoy providing a higher quality suit, so to speak, for the client to wear when they present themselves.
Hmm. Hmm. And on your resume, you've listed that you're currently working as a art director and designer. So
Mhm.
why are you interested in focusing more and almost entirely on the design part?
Well, to me, art director and graphic design, they're kind of slippery terms and they're not exactly pure. So I guess I'm like the water, I kind of flow where I'm needed. And if I need if a project comes in where there's a concept or a headline required, I can step in and do it. If it's more production related, I don't mind getting my hands dirty either.
Okay. All right, cool. So we'll go into the feedback section. And I'm not familiar with this. Um, is as a graphic designer, would you do production work too?
You might do production work as an art director as well. It's a pretty broad, these are both broad terms, and it depends on the specifics of the role. Art director, you might lead people too. You might manage a team to some extent. So they're all over the map, and different people call different titles, different responsibility, attach different responsibilities to these titles.
Okay. Okay. Because in the job description, it was saying that you're going to do presentation decks, digital ads, social media graphics, blogs, infographics, email campaigns, and website graphics. So when you
Mhm.
talk about production, is that like TV production or like the production of these graphics?
It could be print production, it could be web production, it could be, and a lot of times when they have these descriptions, they're not even accurate because they're filled out by a recruiter who isn't entirely familiar, or an HR person who isn't entirely familiar with the requirements of the job. So I have to go in prepared for that those descriptions are probably not accurate.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. Okay, cool. So this question, you may get some form of this question, especially because Mike's done a lot of entrepreneurial work, and he's kind of worked independently as well as for clients in-house. And so they may want to know what are your motivations as to, moving towards working for a client as opposed to continuing to do consult work or work entirely independently on your own. And
Yeah,
if
that
they
comes
do
up.
hire you, right, like what's the motivation there? Are you going to stick around, right? Or are you planning on going back to doing your own thing? So that's the genesis of why I put this question on here for us to practice. And the best way to kind of address that is to talk about like, hey, I've done some really amazing things while I've been, an art director slash designer. I've done X, Y, and Z stuff. I've had really great impact, positive feedback from my clients. But I'm also now looking to transition back towards working for, a dedicated client focusing on graphic design work because you know you can talk about how you were like Bruce Lee flowing with water and like how you're really excited now to be focusing on this one aspect in order to help provide the best suit for your client to wear, et cetera, et cetera. That'll give them a little bit more confidence, right? Like, oh, Michael's done some amazing stuff before. He's had good impacts, but he was doing a variety of skills, and now he wants to focus more on the design part and delivering on that because, maybe some of his projects or whatever, however you want to spin it, brought you the most joy, or you've realized that has the most impact, or that's really where your strengths are, something along those lines that will give them that confidence that, oh yeah, when we bring Michael on for our client, they're gonna love him.
Yeah, no, I'm ready for this. I've heard this
Yeah,
one. Do you want me to
cool.
respond to it or?
No, no, no. I mean, I
Oh,
think we're
okay.
just talking about like certain ways to kind of enhance that if you get asked that in a different form during your interview.
Okay, sure.
All right, cool. Now, do you have screen share capabilities, Mike?
Yeah.
Okay, so this next question. Can you show me your most innovative design or one that you are most proud of, and then walk me through your process as to how you came up with that for your client?
Yeah, let me bring this up. Um, Sorry, my site wasn't up. While we're on that topic, um, let me just, can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just show you the one we talked about earlier. And because it is on point, it is actually probably one of the more innovative projects I've done because it's not, I guess I do think outside the box and I like design in all directions. So as I mentioned, I worked on this project with Gensler where they had this display area they needed to introduce their clients to the firm at Intel in their Silicon Valley headquarters. So I guess I wanted to start by saying, I guess it was innovative in that I took a step back and said, okay, what's the user journey? And initially the journey that was presented to us started inside the building. But when we went to the site, we discovered that actually this Intel logo is part of the journey, and that when people visit the space, they actually take photos next to the Intel logo, and it's all part of it. So I guess what I'm saying is that I incorporated the what was initially introduced in the brief, other areas that we had discoveries with. So we went through the space and really kind of evaluated visual areas for display. And as you go into the space, there are these sidewalls along there where these were some initial comps elevations for what we would do, but these are basically video walls. We would show more about what you can do with the chip than about the numbers behind the chip. So these are some art. This is some art on the left that was made using the chip. And then I came up with this idea. It's a very enclosed area. So I was thinking of opening up the space. So in the area with the bike, I thought the roof could open up with this visual display. And this is actually as you go in as well. So it's really engaging the visitor in terms of interactivity. This is using their real sense technology, where when you move past it, the image moves. And then these are actual photos. This is an actual photo too. So you're actually underwater in this point too. And I guess the thinking with this though too is that it can change it's a good investment for them in the sense that it can change with their brand campaigns and with their messaging and such, so that it can evolve through time without a further investment in the technology. They can just broadcast it into the space.
Okay. And then
So
what do you feel made your approach to this very innovative?
Well, just going beyond the brief, and just sort of taking a step back and saying, what's the problem we're trying to solve, and how do we like not just looking at what we were asked to do in terms of the physical space, but also looking around and going beyond that and evaluating it and going beyond just what was we were asked to do, because part of the user journey begins as they come into the space, and it's affected, it's part of the interpretation of the brand as they engage with the space.
Okay. Okay.
But also we weren't tasked with making digital displays either. It was a wide open brief. However we thought that we could engage the visitor. And I've never worked with digital displays before at all, and so I was going past my own boundaries as well in that regard.
Okay. And then what were some of the different options or designs that you had presented, played around with, but then how you ended up landing with these?
Well, the process was such that there were three or four other designers I was working with. I was the lead designer, but we had these boards for about 2 weeks where we started out with just sketches and evaluated them every few days. And so some of the other ideas were, I would say, interesting visual sort of metaphors in the air, sort of, but they were sort of not very well formed, I would say, in terms of what the physical thing would be. They looked really great in the sketches, but it wasn't really clear what the tools would be used to make them. So I think mine was perhaps more tangible. There were also some there was talk about having a physical drone, like a giant physical drone outside, because that was a technology they were working with as well. But again, I would say that one was perhaps too literal in that, maybe 2 years later or 5 years later, they wouldn't want to use a drone. And so what do they replace that with? So I think this approach is more flexible to their needs as they evolve through time.
Okay, great. So we'll go to the feedback section here. So this is great. I think the example you chose is perfect. I think one of the most important parts of answering this question well is choosing a very powerful example, one that's either for a big client or something that's super notable. You don't want to pick like a small project, even if you may be actually most proud of it, just because you would want there to be like a wow factor to it, right? And then obviously Intel, huge client name, and you were lead designer, so it perfectly matches like the scope and description that they're looking for in this senior design role. So I would say the only things to kind of enhance here is if you could just add these elements to the story that I was asking you about in the follow-up questions. And what it's going to do is it's going to allow you to show more than tell, right? Because in the beginning you were saying I came up with really innovative design for this, but it's hard to know how or why it was innovative unless you
Mhm.
can give me some of that context, right? So you can say it was a very wide open brief. Intel initially wanted X, Y, and Z concepts. We had multiple designers throwing out multiple ideas. We were whiteboarding stuff. We're looking at different sketches. One of the ideas was to put words up, and the words would capture X, Y, and Z things. But as you mentioned, right, like it didn't utilize the technology in the way that Intel wanted to. Someone had the idea of putting a drone outside, et cetera, et cetera. However, my approach was X, Y, and Z because it better utilize the technology. It also allows for more flexibility. Also, it allows for blah 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 blah. If we look at the brand campaign or the values of Intel at the time, they were looking to target blah 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 blah, and that's why in this room I went with the C whatever thing, and in this room I went with this thing, blah 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 blah. Right? That shows that you were really innovative because you give that contrast. Right? Oh, initial idea was this, or client wanted this, but then Michael came up with this idea, and this is why, and then this is why it landed so well. Right? I
Yeah.
pitched it this way. It really resonated with their whatever head of whatever department because blah 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 blah. Whereas these ideas were also good, however, it didn't align with their brand strategy or something something something. Right? That shows me now that it was really innovative as opposed to you being like, look at what I did. Right? Isn't it innovative? Right?
Mm.
Because then it's there's that contrast.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, thanks for that. So
Yep.
a bit more of a sort of background story to the yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Cool. And again, quick plug for anyone in the chat. If you have questions for us, throw them in there. Okay. Michael, can you tell me about a time when you were working on a design for a client and you ended up having a conflict or disagreement with someone from either your design team or the marketing team and how you handled it?
Mm. Well, I mean, sort of. I guess I had a client with OKB Foundation, which is a company that provides healthcare to people in Ghana, in villages in Ghana. And initially, I guess it was a conflict in a way. It wasn't a conflict. It was more, again, identifying a problem that wasn't the client wasn't aware of, and that they came to me and wanted me to extend, design a couple of more pages, and that was it. But I instead looked at it and said, there's more to it than this. Where do these links go? Where there were problems in the UX that they weren't aware of. So in a way, I mean, it wasn't a conflict per se in that he was receptive to my ideas, but it was more a problem that he wasn't aware of. And then he was also not aware that it didn't have their logo was problematic, and their identity was pretty much non-existent. So I guess I went back and designed wireframes, and just started from the beginning, and then set up an actual brand and actual typefaces and so forth, and took it from there. So it wasn't really a conflict. It was more of identifying problems in the initial brief.
Okay. Can you walk me through a different example then of a time where you actually had a conflict with like a coworker or a client? Um, or maybe you and a designer had a disagreement on how something should be done, and then it was hard to convince them, something with a little bit more friction to it.
Okay. Let me just share my screen. Um, can you see the screen?
Not yet.
Oh,
There we go. Yep.
okay. This is one I worked with Shangri-La Hotels in Hong Kong for a number of years. They were my main client with Ogilvy. And with this was a situation where they have an existing sort of brand identity to some extent, but they wanted to come up with these brochures where they would promote this luxury hotel chain throughout the world. And so initially they wanted brochures, and initially I was working through an account person. And there were problems that came up. It wasn't a conflict as much as a problem communicating with the client, because we had an account person that was translating the ideas to the C-suite. And so there were problems that weren't being addressed that we decided we would be better addressed if I worked directly with the C-suite. So that was basically, there were miscommunications going on between the agency and the client. So with this there were a number of situations where basically I was trying to wear the cultural hat, where we had hotels in everywhere from Dubai to Tokyo, and so I didn't want to look silly. I wanted to create book covers that were authentic and culturally appropriate. So I would do a lot of research on them, and then I would, because these headlines are so short, I had to be sure that the type fit properly. So I'd have to work with the copywriter to they would just out of the box use her headlines, and I had to navigate those waters with her. And then I had to navigate with the client as well if there were issues with, say, photography or layouts or the different, yeah, for images and such. So I guess that would be how we dealt with it. And that's often the case with conflict. I've never been comfortable with the idea of defending my work or defending my idea, because I'm more of a problem solver than someone that's at war with the client or with the other person. So at the end of the day, I think communication is really the key to solving these situations, which is why I ended up working directly with the C-suite.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Um, I think in this case, if we're thinking about the interpersonal skills that we're trying to highlight for conflict resolution, I think the first one was basically normal client work, right? Like they wanted an idea, they didn't have a brand identity, you advise them, and then they go along with it. And then with
Mhm.
the second one, it was sounds like more of like someone's playing telephone through you, and then that makes it hard to communicate ideas and concepts, especially if there's like a language barrier. Um, so, and then in order to fix that, you just communicate it directly with the clients.
Mhm.
So I'm not sure that those highlight your interpersonal skills the best in
Yeah,
terms of like conflict resolution or how you would work in a team environment, right? Um,
agreed.
so I think if you can pick one where you had to like maybe someone on the same internal team as you,
Sure.
where you had some butting of heads or clashing of ideas or something, and then how you were able to kind of mediate that, and then um, there was a good outcome, right? That came out of it. Does anything come to mind?
Yeah, I mean, this makes I need to be ready for this one, and those weren't the best I would say examples of conflict scenarios that have taken place. Um, so and it's one that I need to be ready for. So yeah, I mean, because they're not quite really conflicts exactly.
Yeah.
Um, they're kind of sort of, but not probably as directly answering the question as they should.
And just for the audience members, for those of you who are transitioning from like an entrepreneurial solo venture back into working in like a corporate environment or like working for a client slash agency, they are going to want to make sure that you still got those interpersonal skills, because that's going to be one of their areas of concern, right? Is like if someone is used to being their own boss, working by themselves, how would they now play in a team environment? And so just making sure you've got some good examples there is mostly the reason why I included this in this scenario. So
Yeah. Okay.
all right. Okay. Since you've still got screen share access, can you show me one of your other designs in final form? And then can you talk me through the design iterations and edits that you made and how you worked with your client in order to arrive at this final product?
Sure. Um, can you see my screen okay?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, let me just go through. I know it's the work is the result of the process, and it's a critical component in this. So I guess I wanted to talk about a project the process that I typically go through for a brand identity. This is for a project called Sonic Shares. It's an ETF fund fintech that wanted to appeal to a millennial audience. So typically the way I divide the process into phases. Phase one is mood boards, sort of stylescapes with initial directions. And then but before this, we talk about the brand identity and the vision for the firm. Then we get to the mood boards, some initial concepts and explorations. I take the feedback and then take a deeper dive in phase two on one or two directions, and then end with the style guide and applications after that. So as I mentioned, this is Sonic Shares. They had a great name. They're an ETF company that focus on innovative funds that are often overlooked in the marketplace. So I was asked to I discussed it with the client, and these are three directions that I came up with. The first one is called inflection point. And these are the combination of images taken from the web, but also using initial forays into the um, design direction. So I started with these sketches, but was thinking of just a minimalist approach, calling it inflection point, and basically implying that this is the best point that of the fund that their client engages with. The second one is called New Wave, and these are solid shapes and colors that represent transparency between the client and their and the firm. Bold color blocks, and then this is called Ripples, which is working with the sonic aspect and sort of a combination of a bar chart and LED meters that you might find on an audio component. So these are the three directions. They liked the first two and wanted further exploration of them, a deeper dive. So that's what I did here. And when I talk with clients, I also talk about ideas and messaging, because even though they had a copywriter there, I like to start with a foundation in messaging. So in our conversation, these were some four areas that I heard them wanting to focus on, and just to get things started, there's one or two sentences on each of these concepts. And then I divide them up into adjectives so that if we go to comps, we're using headlines, we've got something to work with that are within these brand pillars that they still have a bit of abstraction to flow with. So I went through and just kind of outlined where this form came from. In addition to being this kind of launch button, I was also working with all these S's they have in the name. So splitting it up, and then it becomes almost like a launch button. Then there, different color options, typography, and then most important, application. I think it's almost more important than the mark itself, how it breaks up in different ways. So that's the first one. This is the second one. This one's, honestly, I think it's a bit loose on the kind of connection with the type, but that's okay because they picked the first one, and from there I just did a style guide, and which ultimately ended up with some applications as well. I worked on social media in Canva, and I worked on a website as well. So that is Sonic Share. So that's my basic process without the sketches involved, but the basic kind of phases that I tend to go through. And it's also, you know, the final style guide is up to them in terms of the length. Some clients want a longer, beefier one, but in this case, it was pretty, they didn't really need a super beefy brand guide.
Okay. And then what did you learn from this project when you're working with that client?
Mm, well, I think it developed my skills with actually asking questions in the initial stages and kind of, I would say, engaging and collaborating with them as well, and kind of picking their brain as to where they wanted this to go. But it was honestly a very smooth process where I was surprisingly smooth, where they really liked the direction it went on. And I mean, typically I have more, you know, feedback and issues and such, but this one was really fortunate because it went smooth. But yeah, I think just really I guess learning by doing, and really learning by asking questions, and getting to know, you know, who they are as a client, and what they are looking for in a brand.
Okay. And then if you had to redo this project, what would you do differently?
Mm. I guess I did sort of on my website. I would have liked to have been more engaged with them on the final materials, and I probably, in answer to your last question, I probably would have requested that. I in my on my website, I animated the social, and they hadn't really considered that, and I would have I think I would have liked to have done that, and also be I would have liked to have been more involved in setting objectives so that we could have measurable results as an outcome. I would have liked to have, I always then that's I guess what interests me about this longer term engagement too, is that tends to be the scenario when you work directly with a client. You finish the project, and okay, hope for the best, you're happy with it, but I'd really like to be involved in more longer term engagements where we're measuring results and building the brand in a longer term scenario where it can really, you know, I can really police it and make sure it comes out okay.
Awesome. And that's all, that's like a really good way to also answer the, why do you want this graphic design role? Um, because it's an honest answer, but also it's really good, right? It shows you can talk about how you've made great impact. You've gotten really good feedback, positive feedback from your clients. You've had big names, but you haven't been able to see everything all the way through. And
Mhm.
then these longer term engagements are now more interesting. Well, probably want to say more interesting, but these longer term engagements are more exciting because you actually get to see the tangible results, and you have a better time measuring success. And then it allows you for more flexibility, and you've also never, maybe you can talk a little bit about how you've never had to, help build a brand one way, and then as the brand grows and shifts, over time, then you also want to be there to kind of help navigate a company through that as well.
Mhm.
Okay, cool. I think this example is good, right? I think the everything you talked about is awesome. The process, how you walk them through it, you provided options, you showed me the different ones. The only thing that I would add here is talk a little bit, maybe either about like how you came up with certain ideas, because basically
Yeah.
we we ideally would have wanted some conflict here, right? Because it shows that you were able to handle pushback from the client and blah, blah. But you even admittedly said, right? You provided three options. They loved the first one, and it was super easy. Done, right? So while the result is good, in an interview, we'd like to see a little bit of that conflict. But if we can't get that conflict, then instead, maybe you highlight more on your creativity and innovation on this one, right? You could talk about how you came up with those initial three ideas. I know you walked me through, like, you were like, oh well, there's the S's, and so that's why I went with it with this one, and then this one was bar graphs. and then that's why I went with this way. But like maybe if you break it down a little bit more, right, you could say, maybe initially the client had an idea for X, Y, and Z. Version, number 3 here was their initial idea, and then version 1 and 2 were my own ideas that I came up with separately, right? I focus a lot on the S's here because yes, their name has a lot of S's, but I don't know, right? S also stands for something something, or give me a little bit more of that, like, and then why you chose a certain typography for it, and then why you did it a certain way, and then why the clients loved it so much, and why there was like no pushback at all, right? They were like, oh, option 1, I love that, right? They really liked it the most because I don't know, blah 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 blah.
It's really tricky on that. And point well taken. It's just really tricky because you've got the top level view and then you've got the weeds. I haven't been able to navigate those waters because I guess there's the process in terms of big picture, but then there's the process of exploration as well. And they're both important. But you can get caught up in the weeds and lose sight of the big picture, and I haven't been able to navigate those waters. But I think I could if I took a sketch page from what I did and just kind of tried to evaluate it in one go, present it all in one go, and say, okay, this is my exploration page, and incorporate that into it. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Because it's almost like sometimes like the process is actually just as important as the result, especially in these more creative roles, right?
For sure.
All right, cool. Someone in the audience says, regarding this conflict resolution, what would the company or recruiter like to assess? Should we tailor our story to benefit the company or the team? So it's more of a soft skills question. So the recruiter slash hiring manager is just trying to understand your communication, conflict resolution, and or client management skills. And if you could have a story ideally that covers all 3 of that, that'd be perfect. And then should you tailor your story to benefit the company or the team? It's more for the team because this is like a soft skills teamwork question, right? Like, how do you work in a team environment? Are you a team player? How do you demonstrate leadership without being like too bossy? So ideally, you want to focus more on the team itself. Okay, perfect. We went through all of my questions that I had. I guess, are there any questions that you were kind of stuck on or you got kind of stumped on recently, Michael, in your interviews?
Mm, I'm pretty good with this. I guess I the there I think one thing that might be helpful to people is recently um, talking with the recruiter and talking with the actual decision maker. I guess it's sort of a question in that I guess with the actual recruiter, the first round is being just a gatekeeper that you're trying to get through. And so whereas before I might get more detailed about questions day to day and such, but I've found usually they can't really answer those questions anyway. And I've found that they're, I mean, and maybe I'd be interested in your feedback. They just seem like, my impression is they're just there to sort of make sure, like, you tick most of the boxes, but they're there to make sure you're pretty normal and you're okay, you're presentable to present to their people, and then their people evaluate your folio and decide whether they want to talk to you. But that's essentially their role, right? It's just the gatekeeper.
I would agree. Yep, that's my role.
Okay. All right. So
Awesome.
yeah, because I would try to, I think I might get caught up at times with getting too detailed in the questioning with them. And at the end of the day, they usually can't answer the questions anyway, in terms of it gets tricky in design work because it's the day to day is really important, but the gatekeeper usually can't answer. And like I said, even the descriptions are inaccurate. They'll say they want, you know, super Figma animation, everything, video, everything. And in reality, when you actually go and talk to the second round, they say, no, this is what we're really, we don't really need detailed component work in Figma, or we just need someone that can do basic layouts, or you know what I mean? They don't, it's not always accurate. from the recruiter's perspective to the real guy you'd be working with.
Yeah, yeah. And then that's a very good point too. Is um, you all should be comfortable asking in your interviews before they kind of start to get like a deeper dive on the role beyond the job description, because as Michael pointed out, they're not always super accurate. And then it's also good to know like what are the skills they really do care about, or the ones that are just nice to have. Like in his example with Figma, the job description may say it, but turns out they don't really need it. And so if that's not one of your strengths anyways, this works out perfectly for you. But vice versa, right? If that really is your strength, then you may want to make sure that you're doing your tell me about yourself, or the walk me through your resume, or walk me through your portfolio. Know what to choose and to exclude based on what they tell you, just like as Michael has mentioned. But cool.
And it can be a red herring too, where you can there's some kind of miscommunication between the HR person and the creative director, and they may cross you off the list if you know that Figma thing isn't there, but it turns out in reality that it's not even part of the job anyway.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. All right, well, everyone, let's give Michael a huge round of applause. Thank you for coming on here and doing something different. So this is awesome.
Thanks for the feedback. Appreciate it.
Of course, and good luck with your interviews this Friday. And yeah, Albert, I'll kick it back over to you. And then if anyone wants more interviews, or like to see other mock interviews we've done, please check out the Albert's List YouTube channel. And then, of course, I've got my own YouTube channel as well with general interviewing tips, resume stuff.
All right. Thank you so much, Cory, and thank you so much, Michael, for joining us. We hope you learned a lot along the way here, and we'll be following up with a recording of this video as well as the link to our upcoming interviewing bootcamp, which is this Thursday. If you have any questions, need a payment plan, or just want to know what it is, go to our link in the chat here, which we've dropped. I'm going to go ahead and drop it off again here with a $25 discount before prices go up. So until then, thank you so much, Cory. Thank you so much, Michael. We will all see you very, very soon, and have a wonderful rest of your day, evening, and the week. All right. Bye.
Awesome.